life happens and things change. But that, even if I wasn't supposed to go to those other schools and have those scholarships, for that one lesson for the rest of my life has taught me that no matter what, no matter how hard it might get, no matter how much I might be hanging on the edge here, I can still do it if I just keep going. So when you ask what are some of like the biggest setbacks that have taught me or helped me, to me that was a pivotal moment, because I, in a single moment, thought I had lost a dream that I'd had, but then for the next 3 months fought my way back, and then sometimes was literally beat up, it felt like, for that dream, but then was so validated at the end of that.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today we are joined by Rob Cook. Rob, thanks for joining us today.
Are you kidding, Brian? Tanya, thanks so much for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Looking forward to the conversation, that's for sure.
So the first question that we like to start off with is just a question to get to know you a bit. So we'll ask, who is Rob Cook?
You know, it's funny, you warned me that I was going to be getting this question before, and I honestly thought I could answer in so many different ways this question, because let's be real, all of us have the typical answer, like, my name is Rob Cook. I am a financial advisor by day. I'm a CPA. I'm a CFP. And I am the host of the Contenders Wanted podcast. But honestly, that's not really who we are, right? That's just what we do. So I could say things like, I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm an intense individual. I'm a bit of a go-getter. I love goal setting. I love learning new things. It's like, who am I? I don't know. There's a host of different things that you could say. I'm the oldest son of whatever. There's all sorts of different labels you could put on it. But yeah, I'm all those things and more. That's just part of who I am.
Awesome. So yeah, a couple of things you mentioned there were just the career path you followed, getting into finances and obviously doing your own podcast as well. What kind of led to you getting into the financial field?
That is such a great question. And like most millennials nowadays, I would guess you consider me a bit of an older millennial. I'm, early mid-30s type of thing. It was a windy path for me. I went into school thinking that I was actually going to be an orthodontist. I did almost all the dental school prerequisites, and I had job shadow dentist. I had worked in an endocrinology lab, which is a study of hormones for those who may not be familiar with it, and was full on that path. But I had always thought I wanted to get a business degree of sorts, because I thought, well, I'm going to own my own business one day. I'm not going to just work for somebody. At least that was always what was going through my mind. And so I better at least kind of know what I'm doing. I better study it in school. But what wound up happening is one day I was job shadowing a general dentist, and there's nothing against general dentists. I actually loved my dentist as a kid. There's a reason why I was going to go into it as a profession. But I almost fell asleep while standing up, job shadowing a dentist one day. And I don't know if that was a reflection of my terrible sleeping habits as a college kid, or potentially how bored out of my mind I was, or maybe some combination of the two. But at that point, I thought to myself, maybe this isn't the right path for me. And then started to do a bunch of exploration. Had actually wound up majoring in accounting when I was at BYU. BYU is where I got my degree. And it was one of the top accounting, it is and was one of the top accounting programs in the country. And so in my head, I was like, I'm going to go all in. If I'm going to do this right, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get the best possible business degree that I can. Really enjoyed accounting because I loved the balance sheet and income statement, and just being able to pick those up and go, I know exactly how this company is doing, or exactly how this individual is doing, or even to be able to pick up a tax return and go, I know exactly more or less what's going on financially in this family's life just based off this tax return. And I found that fascinating. I loved, as a kid, always be able to kind of open the hood and look underneath and figure out why did things happen. And so accounting enabled me to do that in the world of business, this world that had always been so foreign to me. And so eventually I decided, you know what, I can find something in public accounting or in accounting in general where I can do the things that I want to do in my career, because I had originally decided to do orthodontia because it fit 4 or 5 criteria that I had as a kid for my job. And I realized those criteria can be pretty universal. I'll just do accounting. So that's what got me into accounting. And I, like most people who get into public accounting, you realize this is horrible and I don't want to do this my entire life. I don't want to work 80+ hour weeks all the time. And so as I'm trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do, I networked a bunch. I picked a bunch of people's brains and realized, well, I could leverage this tax knowledge that I have and I can get into finance and I could serve people every day. Because one of my prerequisites for my career was that I wanted to do something meaningful every single day of my life. And I felt like I was just a cog in a wheel at a big accounting firm. I wasn't doing anything really meaningful. I was just filling out tax returns. I was just filling in, auditing a specific thing. And it's just, there was no purpose to it, it felt like to me. And I felt like I was always looking backwards, always reporting on the past, never actually doing something that would be moving myself or someone else forward in the future. And I found that in personal finance and in wealth management, which is now what I do as my day job.
And how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing this for about 3.5-ish years. I was doing a bunch to get into it long before and was exposed to the industry doing various things, but working full-time in this space, it's only been about 3.5 years.
So before we get real deep into the conversation of, finances and financial freedom, maybe this is a question that I would typically ask at the end, but I'm going to ask now. So what does real success look like to you?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I actually kind of love that question because I don't think my answer is what you would expect from a financial advisor. I think most people would think that, as a financial advisor, financial planner, a financial coach, however you want to describe me, he would probably talk in some context about money. But in my head, money has nothing to do with the equation. Money is a tool to be used by us to accomplish our dreams and our hopes and to hopefully be successful in some way. Success for me is living a life worth living, and whatever context that is for you. For me, my faith and my family are number one and number two. Maybe depending on the moment, one might be one, the other one might be two, type of thing. And so for me, if I were to fail in either of those areas, faith or my family, I wouldn't have success no matter what amount of money I had made in my life, no matter what kind of success I had professionally, no matter what impact I had on the world if I failed in those areas. And so I think success is honestly a very personal definition. How you define success and what you're chasing for your success or what you think you should be chasing is very, very personal. So that's why I say it's a life worth living. It's a life that you are proud of. It's a life that is meaningful. It's given in service, in large part, in my opinion, to others. And that to me is success.
I appreciate that, especially when we're having a conversation about finances, right? I know my mind sometimes goes to, okay, the person's going to say, yeah, how many houses I end up with, what's in the bank account, how much I, leave to my family and stuff like that, which is all great, but really appreciate that success looks different. And like you said, is a life worth living, right? So,
for sure.
Great.
It's funny you say that because I recently had a conversation with someone. We were talking about this idea of success and if you focus on money and kind of what that eventual byproduct is. Like I said, money is a great tool, but money is one of those things where if you focus on it, there's never enough of it. It just seems to, I just want X amount. And then when you get there, you realize there's more that I should have, or I want, or I could have, or it'd be that much better if I had this or that. And it's this never ending, unsatiable monster almost. Whereas if success for you is being a good husband and good father, that might be a bit more intangible. You can't put a dollar and cents on it, but you can pretty well know on a day-to-day basis, am I being a good husband and a good father today? Did I win today? Was I successful today? And if you're honest with yourself, I think you can very easily know yes or no whether or not you're there. And you can be there right now. It's not dependent on all sorts of external factors.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we've been recently talking about a lot of financial elements and just kind of trying to lay the foundation for people. But today we're going to be talking about financial freedom. So in terms of financial freedom, what are some of those core elements that we should have in place as we're trying to put ourselves in a position of being financially free?
Oh, yeah. So many things that we could say here. I think the first and most important thing is to define what financial freedom is for you. I cannot tell you how many times I have had conversations with people, and it doesn't matter if they are early, mid-20s, want to talk about financial freedom, or mid-70s and wanting to talk about their, financial freedom or retirement or however they want to describe it. There have been far too many people who I've met who have no clue of what that really actually means for them. They say, I want to be financially free. Okay, that's great. What does that mean? I can have my bills covered. Okay, what does that mean? How much? on a monthly basis? What does that even look like for you? Or, I don't know. All right, well, we should figure that out, right? Or, okay, I want to be financially free. Describe that. What does that look like to you? Does it look like, hey, I'm still working, but I don't need to? Because that's very different from, I need all of my expenses covered because I don't want to work another day in my life. I want to be able to go out and just give 100% full time to a charity that I care about. That's still financial freedom, but those are two very different versions of it. And I think people a lot of times are scared that they won't be able to reach their goal of financial freedom. So they'll just talk about it and think that they're kind of working in that direction, but they're afraid to actually nail down what does that really look like and what is that actually going to cost me. And so they never actually really wind up getting there or creating the life that they really want because they don't take the time and have the faith to just do the work, define it, and then start working in that direction. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland and Lewis Clark's, Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Clark's classic book. She approaches Cheshire Cat and says, which path should I take? What does the Cheshire Cat say? Well, where are you trying to go? And she goes, oh, I don't know. And Cheshire Cat goes, well, then any path will take you there. And it's the same thing in our finances. If we don't clearly define what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go, what it is that we want to, the outcome we're trying to get with this tool, money, then there is no chance that you will ever get there. You might, maybe, but chances are pretty slim, frankly.
So once we've defined what financial freedom is, I guess what would kind of be the next step that you would recommend for someone?
Well, it is a bit unique depending on each person's situation, right? Because finances and life are just messy because we're all messy, right? So I can talk in general terms, but I couldn't tell you, oh, you need to do this next, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Generally speaking, once you know where you want to go, then the next step is to back into how you're going to at least preliminarily get there, right? The path is going to change because life is messy. But we can at least make a preliminary path. So let's say, for example, financial freedom just means that I want my basic living expenses covered. Food, rent, utilities, and water, right? Okay, basic utilities and rent. Okay, well then we figure out a number and back into how much is that on a monthly basis roughly. Okay, then how much of an asset base or kind of an income stream do you need to have in order to get that amount? Okay, based off of you and your preferences and your investment style and your experience, then we would figure out, okay, what's the asset class or what is the investment route or what is the career path that you would then need to take to generate that type of an income stream or an asset base to create that for you. I think that's generally the next step. Once you know where you want to go, then you backfill the path to be able to get there and kind of break it down by decades, years, months, however you want to do it.
And it's interesting, right? Because we know that those stages and what we would have to break down, it's not going to be something that's forever. And, I think back to when we were saving up for a wedding and, shortly after that, the amount of jobs that we both had and what we were doing, right? Like I remember working at a shelter at the front desk, working my full-time job, then going and doing a sleep shift at a group home. And like Brian was working at a hotel and Tim Hortons. It was just like, we were all over the place, right? But the thing is, those were the goals for that, or those were the steps we needed to take for the short-term goals, right? That's not where we are all these years later, but it's so true what you say about, just writing them down, making those steps, and then moving forward. Yeah.
And I think also taking an accurate assessment of kind of where you're at, right? Like for some couples, like in your case, you knew you wanted this goal. It was a short time frame. The only thing you could do to really get there was to work multiple jobs.
Right.
Sometimes that's what you have to do. If you give yourself more runway, maybe you can adjust and you can do other things, right? But just having that recognition of where you want to go, being willing to own where you're at currently, because sometimes you're in a great situation currently and sometimes you're not, and then making the path to get there. Yeah, it's the surefire way to be able to actually reach your financial goals that a lot of times people just don't take the time to do, unfortunately.
One thing you mentioned as well was the investment strategy. It was just one of the things that you mentioned in the previous answer, but I'm just curious now to know, I guess selfishly, I'm curious to know what is your kind of philosophy or investment strategy?
Okay, so that's a great question, Brian. In my opinion, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what asset class you're talking about, whether you're talking real estate, crypto, stocks and bonds, businesses, whatever it might be, it all comes down to cash flow. What is the income stream that the asset creates?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of times people will think of investments in terms of the capital gains is the technical term in accounting, right? The growth in the actual value of the asset. But realistically, the value is derived from the cash flows. That, for example, those that are familiar with financial analysis, the discounted cash flows is your kind of gold standard for financial modeling and figuring out what is the value of something. So value is derived from the cash flow that it creates. That's why a portfolio of traditional stocks and bonds, advisors will say, oh, you can take 4% a year, roughly. The 4% rule is what it's called. Now, there's arguments if that should be more or less, depending on who you talk to. But either way, let's just go with 4% for now. 4% means that's the income stream you could expect from that asset class if it's in a well-diversified portfolio over time without the asset going away. Great. Okay, that's the cash flow from that. Real estate, clearly you have monthly cash flows from rent and things like that. Businesses, you should have monthly, quarterly, annually cash flows also coming from that. Hence the reason why we have P&Ls and cash flow statements and things when you're actually looking at a business. But ultimately, it all comes down to what is the cash flow coming from it. And that's also why it's so important to ask that question of what does financial freedom look like for me? What is the cash flow that I need from it? Because if you don't know what the cash flow is that you need from it, you cannot therefore then define the assets that you will need to cover that cash flow if you're looking for financial freedom in terms of not needing to work. So when it comes to an investment strategy, I don't really necessarily care which asset you're investing in, as long as you're thinking about it correctly and you're not just gambling. In my opinion, there's a lot of people out there who think they are investing, but realistically, they're actually gambling. A perfect example of this is people who buy single-family homes who either barely or don't cover just the mortgage payment on the house. In my opinion, you're gambling. You're not actually an investor. If you're an investor, you would have cash flow coming in that actually gives you a specified return over and above what's at the bank. Because I'm sorry, yes, so many people will be like, oh yeah, well my money's basically losing value sitting at the bank. If I just put it into a house, that's totally fine. I'm like, that's fine, but what if you buy at the height of the market and it drops 20% on you? And then of course the next couple of years. Or you're having to pay $100 a month to be able to maintain that property in the hopes that it goes up in value.
Yeah.
Now you are paying $100 a month to the bank to put your money in a house. So hopefully it goes up, but if it doesn't, you're screwed. You're gambling. Might be a better bet than say, all black on the roulette table in Vegas, but it's still gambling. So in my opinion, my personal investment strategy is think in terms of cash flows, have set criteria in terms of I want X percent from this asset class or that percent from this asset class, or I won't invest in it. And at the end of the day, think in terms of the cash flow. Think in terms of actually really investing and not just gambling your money because, hopefully I'll get a better return. A hope and a prayer is never an investment strategy, period.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. And I think there is a little bit of room in investing. Well, number one, if you've put yourself in a position where you do have some disposable income and that's what you want to do with it is kind of gamble on the market and see what it can do for you. But you have to really put yourself in that position and know that it's a gamble. You have to be prepared to lose that money.
You can't be in denial that, oh yeah, I'm an investor because I put money in crypto at 2 years after it had really gone off. No, you're not. You're just speculating on crypto going up some more. That's all you're doing. And that's okay, as long as you own it. And as long as you don't do too much of it, frankly. There's a reason why in a well-diversified portfolio, you can have what's called a sandbox, which is 3 to 5% that you're playing with. You can make some gambles on. That's okay. We all kind of like to play it a little bit. Let's be real. We're all human. But just don't play with too much. That's when you really hurt yourself.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Now, in terms of, I guess, your experience, was finances something that was always a big topic in your house, or was this something that that you just kind of learned on your own once you developed that interest after you realized being an orthodontist wasn't going to be for you?
Yeah, good question. So a large part of my personal finance and investing curiosity came as a kid working with my grandfather. My mom and dad are awesome and taught me a lot of wonderful skills, and I wouldn't be who I am without them, period. But when it comes to money, frankly, I think about my grandfather, not them. Not that they didn't attempt to teach me, but I just feel like his lessons were probably slightly more impactful. And my grandfather was a successful entrepreneur and real estate investor. And as a kid, every summer, I would go and work with my grandfather on his property and on other properties that he owned. doing odd jobs, maybe taking care of the yard, repairing something in the house or, around the place. And during those times, we would have conversations. And I remember as a kid having some of my first conversations where I felt like he was talking to me as if I was an adult and as if I understood everything. But he would explain things in such a way that in my 15, 16-year-old mind, I would kind of get it, and it would be enough to blow my mind sometimes, but not enough to really understand. And he'd like look across, because he always drove Ford F-150. He'd look across the seat at me and just a little twinkle in his eye, like, yeah, I just blew your mind, didn't I? About like different things as it pertains to money and finance and investing and things. And so it really started there. I mean, I was obsessed with personal finance and trying to figure stuff out long before I got into accounting and into wealth management. In fact, when I was in school at 19 years old, 21 years old, I had a budget and was saving money. I had 10 grand saved in my bank account when I married my wife. I paid cash for her ring and for the honeymoon and for everything else because I was obsessed with figuring out a way to make it work, paying my way and saving my money well. And I am gonna be financially free. That's why I thought I was going to be a business owner, even when I was an orthodontist, right? So this isn't something that I've just, really come across the last few years. This has been honestly a lifelong itch of mine to kind of figure out and learn more about that. I think honestly was prompted by Grandpa as a kid, him just kind of just throwing enough out there to get me interested and kind of let me run with it.
I think that's so neat because, there falls into place that legacy, right? And, we talk a lot about that, the financial part and the legacy we want to leave there, but also family. So it's always neat to hear, how somebody really ended up and got the values and, the ideas as to where they wanted to go. And, even when we're thinking about the financial part, it's, what legacy do we want to leave for our kids, right? And we've had that conversation with other people who have come on the show just talking about the finances. So do you have any points and suggestions for just legacy and leaving the financial part for our kids?
Yeah. Well, once again, it goes back to defining what do you want to be your legacy from a financial perspective, right? For some people, their legacy is their kids and giving to them. Sometimes their legacy is paying for their kids' college. Sometimes their legacy is leaving an asset base for the kids. Sometimes their legacy is helping them get in their first home. Sometimes the financial legacy is fill in the blank. Like I said, life's messy. There's all sorts of different things that can come up. But for at least defining for you, what does that actually look like? But at the end of the day, honestly, I think a legacy is so much more than just the money. In fact, I think the money can be used to teach better lessons that'll stay with your kids longer than just trying to give them a big pile of ones and zeros. In terms of creating a financial legacy, to go back to your question, Tanya, I think I couldn't tell you any one specific thing because it really does depend on what you want to do, right? And so that's why, and I think this might sound a little bit cliche, but that's why I keep circling back to you have to figure out what does that actually mean to you, at least right now, even if that definition changes. Because maybe you think you want your legacy to be that I'm going to leave each of my kids $100,000 when I die. Okay, that's great. That is an admirable thing that you want to do from a financial legacy perspective. But then, 10 years from now, life changes. One of your kids needs that money now. Okay, well, maybe that legacy is just adjusted a little bit, and that's okay. But what you do in each situation is also different. I think because money is a great tool from a financial legacy perspective, no matter what you do, I always think that it's best to use the tool to teach, to instruct, to make that next generation or that next group better instead of just a pure gift. Whether that gift is to a charity or to a child or to an organization or whatever it might look like. That financial legacy is, in my opinion, best used to teach them other principles. Have you ever seen the movie? So that maybe you guys can help me out here.
Okay.
There was a movie, it's probably 2 decades plus old at this point, but it's the story of a grandfather who passes away, and he was an oil tycoon worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars.
Okay.
But he decides not to give any of his wealth or in his ownership in his companies to any of his children, except for one of his grandsons, who's kind of this trust fund kid. He's kind of spoiled. But instead of giving it to him, what he does is he gives him a series of tasks that he must complete in order to have access to certain pieces of the fortune. Things like he has to get a true friend. He had to give selflessly. He had to He had to do all sorts of different things. And what he did is he wound up teaching this grandson about the real meaning of life, the real purpose for the money, the real reason for doing anything. He had to learn less about hard work, all sorts of different things. And so when I think of financial legacy, that's what I think of. And I wish I could remember the name of this movie, but it's completely escaping me. But if anyone knows what I'm talking about, by all means,
Right.
message either of us.
Yeah.
Because
I'm
I
trying
wish
to
I could
find it
remember its
here.
name right now.
Brian trying to look it up, but
Yeah.
I mean, hey, even the story behind all that, it fits and it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, and there's another movie I can't remember the name of either, but it was with, I know Richard Pryor was the main character, where he had to spend all of this money in a certain, he had like 20, or he wasn't the one who had to spend the money. I can't remember who the other, maybe it was Gene Wilder, but he had to spend all of this money within like 24 hours, or it was a really short time frame, but he had to spend a huge amount of money in order to get the inheritance, because the person who left it to him wanted to make sure he wasn't going to squander it away. So he had to just really indulge, and it took him right down to the wire to actually spend all of the money that he had to spend. And it was interesting because it was kind of the same idea. They use this to teach the financial lesson.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah, I was just going to say something about, you talking about the legacy piece. So, we're nodding our heads as you're talking. And I think that for us, what stands out is one, just talking about it and coming up with, ideas, right? Instead of it just being like, oh, all these years later, we haven't talked about it. And another thought is when, we as parents should always try to do better than what our parents have done. Right. So if they, had put all these things into place for us, then there's no excuse why we can't even do better. So,
I completely agree. Actually, that reminds me, my grandfather, his dad was an immigrant to this country, and his dad died when he was a teenager. And my great grandfather had worked hard, but, had a very, very, very modest life for the family. And then my grandfather went on to enroll in the military before he was technically old enough to, sent all of his money back to his mom, and worked his butt off in corporate America for a while, and then started his own business and worked his butt off there. And because of him, got our family to, quote unquote, the next level. We weren't like incredibly wealthy. We don't have a ton of money. No, we don't. But they moved from this very, very humble life to, say, middle class, right? And then my parents have attempted to build off of that, and I'm attempting to build off of that. And that, to your point, we should attempt to always try and give more and give better to our children. Which, by the way, that actually just reminded me. The name of the movie was called The Ultimate Gift. Or The Greatest Gift.
There we go.
The one I was talking about was Brewster's Millions.
Oh, there you go. Okay. It just took us both a few minutes to remember the names of them.
Oh, man. Because you mentioned this too, is just, again, teaching our children. So I'm going to ask you about like some of the lessons that you are teaching your child or plan to teach them. But before we get there, I want you to think back to those drives in the F-150 with your grandfather, and just share with us some of the key lessons that you learned there, some of the things that really stick out to you from those conversations.
Well, it's funny. When I think of those things, most of the thoughts that come to mind actually aren't money related at all. Like, for example, my grandfather was known for saying all the time, Rob, remember, Lord helps those who help themselves. The Lord helps those who help themselves. Like, that is if I could have like a tagline for my grandfather, that would be his tagline.
Love it.
Because he was a man of deep faith,
Yep.
very committed to his faith and to his family, like me. I mean, there's a reason why it's distilled in all of us, right? And, but he was one that you had to work hard. The Lord loved you. He was going to look out for you, but he didn't help no slackers. Not that he didn't help them, but you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Nope.
there was a saying from a leader of our church, you have to hit your knees and pray as if everything depends on the Lord, but then get up and work like everything depends on you. Like that was my grandfather to a T. He was a great man, but man, he worked hard. And he knew where his priorities were, and he put those things first that were most important, but man, he knew how to work. He had 10 acres and worked on that property until the day he died, basically. Well, not quite, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that is one of the biggest ones that sticks out to me. The Lord helps those who help themselves. Another version of that, if you're not a person of faith, is, the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have, right? Isn't that what some great athlete said? That I can't remember off the top of my head. But the principle is true. You just got to work hard. And I think it comes the same thing is true for finances. You got to be willing to put in the work. Put in the work to figure out the plan. Put in the work to figure out where you're at. Put in the work to figure out how you're going to get there. And put in the work to actually execute on that plan. Life is work, and that's okay. It's meant to be. Work changes us. It molds us. It builds us. And that's a good thing. Whatever your work might be. Another lesson that Grandpa always talked about, or he never actually talked about, but it was always so clear that it was important to him, was the one-on-one. Grandpa always took time, like I said, we'd be driving in the truck, the F-150, we'd go to Carl's Jr. almost every single time that I worked for him, and I'd get a Western bacon cheeseburger, because he knew that was my favorite burger as a teenager, and we'd go there and give me a Western bacon cheeseburger. And he always took the time to spend that one-on-one time, and he would ask about what was going on in my life, and he would just listen, and then he would ask questions, and then he, might give some advice if I was willing to hear it, but he spent that one-on-one time. He understood the value of real relationships, and not just kind of superficial ones that we see so much in our world today of, oh yeah, I'm connected with you on Facebook, but I haven't seen you in over a decade or talked to you, but we're friends. Really? I've got 2,000 Facebook friends. And how many of them have you talked to in the last year and a half, 2 years, right? And beyond Facebook. I mean, he was really good about really getting to know people, and people loved him for it, honestly. And so for me, that was one great lesson, because people used to talk about how Grandpa was so charismatic. He was always able to connect with people. And it's like, it's just because he took time to actually get to know them. Yeah. And when you connect with people on a human level, you move past the walls and the barriers that we all put up. And human to human is so much more meaningful and impactful, but it's more vulnerable. And so you have to be willing to go to those places with people. And he knew how to do that.
That's great stuff. Now, in terms of, and I guess I'll kind of circle back to just the communication piece and teaching some of these things. What are some of those conversations that you either had, because I know your little one is still really young, but conversations that you're having, or kind of some of the conversations that you've mapped out in your head in terms of just teaching some of these financial principles, or even just some of these life principles as well?
Yeah. Well, ironically, my little girl might only be 4, but we're already teaching her about budgeting and saving for her goals.
Nice.
So for example, she wanted this little toy from Walmart. She saw one time walking around with her mom, and my wife wisely was like, no, we're not going to get that. But Mom, I really want it. Okay, well then you can earn money for it, right? She's 3.5 at the time. So what's she really going to do? Not much. But over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, she worked really, really hard. Every single day she'd wake up, Mom, what can I do to earn some money today? And we give her 50 cents or so, but she wound up saving like $20. So she could go buy this little toy. And it was a cool experience, because we both taught her the value. We taught her a few different principles. One, the value of saving for a goal. Number 2, that hard work can get you to where you want to be. Number 3, that she can do it. She might only be 3.5, but you can do it. You can get there. It's not impossible, which I think is a lesson that so many more people need to get nowadays. And then we also threw, because we're people of faith, we threw in a little tithing element in there. Got to give the Lord his portion. So she knew she had to work a little bit extra, so she could then pay the Lord and have enough left over to be able to buy her little gift. But each of those principles I think are really valuable, right? And she was 3.5. Now, granted, does she really quite understand all of them? No. So it's going to take more repetition and more of those. And there's plenty of other things I hope to teach her. But that's, I think, is just a simple example of how we're already trying to teach her these things, even as a really little girl.
And yeah, hard work, right? Like when you're talking about your grandfather and then teaching the kids, like that's big in our household too, right? Because the reality is they see, and then they just think it just comes out of nowhere, right?
You don't have a money tree, Mom?
Right? So yeah, teaching them, and it's been going on for years too. Our youngest is 5, but our oldest is 12. So teaching them, hey, you want to work? They come, they'll help me clean. They were picking strawberries this summer, and it's all about, it's not going to come easy, because so many people think, hey, you want to become a millionaire, you want to save, you want to do this, it's going to happen overnight. It's not, right? So definitely a really good principle. And then I find when they've saved to purchase the item or they've saved to help towards it, guess who takes better care of these things, right? It's not just, oh, you can throw it or do whatever you want, because they've worked for it.
Tanya, I think what you're saying is awesome, and I completely agree. And in fact, I've actually noticed kind of something. I'm one of those that I love to learn people's stories because I like to tease out, like, okay, what's the 2 or 3 things that they did that really enable them to take their life to the next level? That's actually kind of like the gist of my entire show, Contenders Wanted. That's effectively what I do. But I do this all the time, and I love reading biographies of people and kind of figuring out what was their process, right? And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to or stories that I've read about where someone who looked like it was easy for them to make $1 million had potentially decades of work that they put in before that moment that led to that one moment. I think this idea of the overnight success is honestly a myth. Because for even those who were, quote, overnight successes, or the young entrepreneurs that make lots of money, if you really look at their lives, more often than not, they've put in years doing certain things that eventually still allowed them to be successful at such a young age, period. I don't think that an overnight success exists, period. And I think any of us who want to have anything worth having, whether that's financial freedom or a great strong family or great relationship with my friends or a healthy, strong body, it doesn't matter what it is, it takes time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in our fast-paced, gimme, always at your fingertips type world, that kind of sucks. And we're being trained to have things right now. And so remembering that and teaching our kids, to your point, Tanya, I think is so important to give them real life experiences where, hey, it's okay if it takes a little bit of time, because this is really how the real world works if you want the things that you really want.
So true.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was that said it, but somebody said, yeah, I'm an overnight success. It only took me 20 years.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you don't see the nights and the weekends and the long days of putting in that time before to ever get to where you are now.
100% true. Now, I want to circle back to you talking about your daughter, being 3.5 and giving her some jobs to do. And this is the one challenge that I think we have, especially with our youngest. He's 5. What are some of the things that you, and I'm just curious for my own selfish reasons as well, what are some of the things that you got her to do that, to kind of make up those tasks or jobs that you rewarded her for?
Well, realistically, I mean, she's 3.5.
Yep.
It's not like she can go mow the lawn. Right?
Yeah.
But what my wife and I did, is we just brought her along with all the stuff that we were already doing. Right? So maybe I was cleaning the bathroom. I brought her along and had her clean the toilet, help me clean the toilet. I put the toilet bowl cleaner in and tell her, okay, just scrub the bottom of the toilet. After you help me clean the bathroom, you make 50 cents, or whatever. Right? Now, did I have to probably go back in and clean the toilet bowl after she had cleaned it? Yes, of course I did. Right? Or, wipe the counter, please. And, she just basically spreads it around. But, at least she's doing it.
Yeah.
Is what it really comes down to. And so I would rather have to do it twice and teach her the value of that work than to just go, okay, well, you're 3.5. There's nothing I can really have you do that's up to my adult standard. So therefore, I'm not going to have you do anything. Right? So honestly, I found the best thing is I just bring her along with whatever that I'm doing and just have her do it with me. And ironically, the funny part about that is that she winds up just enjoying our time together, and then she'll just come and do those things later with me, which I've found is kind of one of my favorite parts. Because now anytime I'm about to go clean the bathroom or something, she'll be like, Dad, can I come with you? Sure, let's do it. Because we listen to music and we have fun and we're laughing, it's good times.
Yeah, it's all that age appropriate, tasks, right? Because later you'll find out if you add more kids to the mix, but we have a 12-year-old and then the 9-year-old twins. So yeah, they can mow the lawn or shovel or, do the laundry and the big stuff, right? And then you hear them, well, Asher doesn't have to do blah, blah, blah. Well, he's 5 and you were 5 as well too. Right? So you do things that are age appropriate. For sure. If you've been at a job for one day, you're not going to be expected to do the same things that, your manager's doing.
Yep.
Account it and sum it up to all that.
Oh, yeah. Now, as a kid, so I grew up the oldest of 5 kids in my house. And as kids, we had chores. We had daily chores and weekend chores. And I plan on doing the same thing with my little girl when she gets old enough. But as the oldest, I remember those times being like, what the heck? I have to take out the garbage. I have to sweep the porch. I got to make my bed, clean my room, empty the dishwasher. I got to do all these things. And Tori, she's, like 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
She doesn't do any of that. She just take her plate over to the sink.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Now, as an adult, I'm like, wow, I was dumb as a kid. but I completely understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Age appropriate. Definitely.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of the, so again, we've covered your journey. We've talked about some of the things that have worked out for you, some of the areas where, especially in school where you decided to kind of change paths. I guess shifting from the kind of the successes, I want to focus a little bit on some of the things that people will probably get the most value from. But do you have a favorite failure? And I guess I'll kind of give the context for this. Is there any lessons that you learned from the things that didn't work out well along the way?
Oh yeah, I got plenty of those. I think most of us do. If we're willing,
I was going to say,
it, right?
Don't we all? I always let Brian ask that question.
Oh yeah, the one that I always think of. This was probably a pivotal moment for me, just in my life in general. And there's like a front end and the back end of this story that each had great lessons attached to it for me personally. But let me give you some context. So I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", 235 right now. And in high school, I was a big kid. And I actually got recruited to play college football. And originally, I actually never thought that I would be able to do that. In my head, you just got good grades, so you go to a good school. So I never really thought about it. And then all of a sudden, my junior year, school started coming and knocking. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. Not many people had ever been recruited for my school, so there really wasn't a lot of context for it. It just wasn't really on the radar.
Yeah.
And so I got some scholarship opportunities. And I was very, very grateful for them. My dad and I, my family, we went through this process of trying to figure out where I was going to go. And I eventually actually wound up passing on my scholarship opportunities and choosing to walk on at BYU, which that's a whole story in and of itself, how I even decided to do that. And just put it this way, BYU was not my first choice. I did not necessarily want to, but the Lord had other plans for me. I think one of them was this experience that I'm about to share with you. So as a walk-on at any larger school, there's very few of you that walk on. But walk-ons are kind of the scum on the bottom of their shoes in terms of sometimes the way that you're treated. At least that's the kind of the way we were treated. And I was a preferred walk-on, which means that they would save a spot for me if I decided to walk on. And so I walk on the first day. Walk-on tryouts are, half hour long. It's great. And afterwards, they posted a list of who had made it, and we go into the coaches' offices, and they tell us, okay, your first workout's going to be tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. You're supposed to be there every single day. If after a month or so, you'll get all these little benefits or whatever, basically prove your worth over the course of the next month. But until then, you're just a walk-on. Oh, and by the way, if you're late to anything, you're immediately off the team. Oh, well, okay. Ooh, I don't want to be late. I just gave up all these scholarships and everything to come to this school. So I went to bed at like 10 o'clock that night because I told myself, okay, I'm going to get up at 5:30, make sure that I'm there plenty early because I only lived a few blocks away from the training facilities. I woke up every hour, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, just because I was so nervous. I did not want to be late. And then I woke up at 6. And I remember I looked over at my clock and I literally yelled out loud. My roommate at the time, he wasn't an athlete at all. He was just a young, skinny dude from Florida. I was, oh crap! Screamed and started. He wakes up. What's going on? Thinking like the place is burning down. Threw on my sweats and I sprinted to the facility. And I got there at 6:05. And of course, they'd already started working out. They had already done their thing. And Coach Omar was the name of the weightlifting coach, Coach Justin and Coach Omar. And he just looked at me like, you stupid kid. And he just looked at me and he goes, sit over there in the corner. I'm like, okay. So I just kind of sat there in the corner for the most awkward hour-long workout possible because all the guys that are on the team, they're all dressed exactly the same. I'm in my, random outside clothes and that I just threw on that were next to my bed. And they're looking at me like, who's this kid? He's not even working out. And he was, who is this kid, right? I could just feel the eyeballs just like burning into me. Judgment, hardcore. And they were like, get out of here. What are you even doing here, hanging around still after, like 45 minutes? I'm like, well, I don't want to leave. I was supposed to be here. And they're like, doesn't matter. You should get out of here. I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. And in my head, I'm freaking out thinking, oh crap, I just lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
At least in my head as an 18-year-old kid, it was everything, my football career. So workouts end between 9 and 9:30. I go back to my dorm. I get cleaned up, grab my stuff. I go to my classes. About 1:30. By the way, practice started at 3 that day. Actually, film started at 2. So about 12:30, 1 o'clock, I get a phone call. And it's, I played outside linebacker. It's the linebacker coach, Coach Tidwell. He goes, Rob, get in my office now. I was in the middle of this biology class in this big old auditorium with people everywhere. And I was, of course, sitting in the middle. Yes, sir. Close it. And I just stand up and I just start walking out of the auditorium. I had never left a class before. I was one of those like straight A kids in high school who was just, would never do anything I wasn't supposed to do type of thing. I was probably really boring in most people's opinions. But either way, I was standing in the middle of class, being the good student, and I just stand up and I leave. First class I'd ever left. I run to the football offices. And there's this lady named Cheryl, who ran the front desk. She was this older lady. She was probably late 60s, early 70s, who just loved the program. And so she ran the front desk. And we had met type of thing. And so I come in the front door. She looks at me with these big old eyes like, oh, you're so dead. And I come around the corner past her desk, and I can hear the head coach just yelling about me. And there's this long hallway before you get to Coach Tidwell's office. And I hear the noises coming from Coach Tidwell's office. So the head coach is in his office yelling at him about me. Why did we let this kid in here? How does he think he is? All this stuff. And I'm standing outside the door just wishing I could just evaporate into the wall, hearing all of this. And then the coach comes out, and it's like he burned me with his just stare. Didn't say anything to me. Just looked at me and then just walked away. Coach Tidwell beckons me into his office. So I come in and I say, basically gives me a dressing down, just like coach had done to him, he did to me. And 2.0. And I was told that the only reason why I'm not ejected from that team right now is because of the fact that I was a preferred walk-on. But I now have all access, all privileges revoked, all everything. And I wasn't allowed to practice. We were given codes to be able to get in the buildings. All my codes were immediately gone. I had no ability to get in. I had put some stuff in a locker. I couldn't touch it. And I was told that the only thing I was allowed to do was go to workouts. And they were not going to give me any of the team clothes now. They were not going to give me anything. I was literally, of the 135 guys on the team, I was number 135. Probably 175, frankly, in their minds. And I was suspended. I wasn't allowed on the facilities other than that one workout at 6 a.m. And I remember leaving that building feeling like I've just destroyed my entire possibility of a football career because I slept until 6. And it was not me. Like I said, I was kind of a boring high school kid. I was never late to anything. It was not me to be late. I mean, I woke up every hour because I was so nervous about being there on time, except for the 1 hour I needed to wake up. And I remember calling my dad and being on the verge of tears. Like, I don't know what to do. I literally can't even, I can't go to practice. I don't have any gear. I don't even know I can't even see the field. Like, I'm already behind. I'm going to be even more behind. And they hate me, now. So my dad, the wise guy that he is, he lets me talk and kind of get it all out. And then he goes, okay, well, what can you do right now? Well, I don't know. They're going to have to start practice here in a little bit. And he goes, could you watch practice? Well, yeah, but I'd be that dude standing outside the fence. So at least maybe you could learn some stuff. Maybe you could watch, kind of figure it out. Okay, that's a good idea. And he goes, okay, now I'm going to call you at 5 a.m. every morning to make sure you're awake. So, okay, thanks, Dad. So I set an alarm for 4:30, 4:45, 4:50, 4:55, and 5 o'clock every morning to wake me up for the rest of the semester. And my dad would call me at 5 a.m., and I was in Utah, and he was in California, so it was 4 a.m. for his time. He'd wake up, and he'd call me to make sure that I was awake. And for the rest of the season, I woke up, and I was at the weight room by 5:30, and I left. I was the first one there and the last one to leave every single day. I wound up putting on 15 pounds of solid muscle that semester just because of how much extra work that I put in. I went and stood outside that fence watching practice, because I was excluded from everything, for 2.5 weeks before finally one of the coaches came up to me and was like, okay, you can stand inside the fence. This kid clearly isn't going away, right? And so for another week and a half, I stood just inside the fence. And once again, I'm just there in my street clothes. I'm this random kid. Everyone's looking around like, who's this schmuck, right? And finally, after 4.5 weeks or so, they let me start to practice again. But by this time, it's 2.5 months into the season. I'm so far behind I could never catch up. But I refused to give up. I kept working hard on all my classes, kept showing up early, kept being the last one there. I was so exhausted. I remember I jokingly said that I learned the art of napping because I could fall asleep within 5 minutes because I was staying up late trying to get my homework done. I was waking up super early to make sure I was the first one there, and I was working my butt off the whole time. And I jokingly said that I was a bigger version of Rudy, just getting beat up all the time. Like, they would purposely put me in drills where I would just get smashed all the time. Like, I remember there was this guy named, his last name was Brock. He wound up playing left tackle for the Baltimore Ravens. He was 6'6", 335 pounds, just solid muscle, just this enormous human being. And I remember him literally picking me up and pile driving me into the ground on this one drill that we did a couple of different times. I was just like, those are the drills that I got. That's just that. We need a human punching bag. Let's throw Rob in there. Oh, we need someone to get just destroyed as the defenders for a tackling dummy. Let's throw Rob in there. I just was beat up all the time, but I would not give up. And finally, at the end of the semester, we got invited to the Las Vegas Bowl, which is nothing like, it's not like a huge bowl, but it was a good bowl for us to go to. We wound up winning our conference, and I got invited to go with the team to the bowl game. And we were playing UCLA that year. And the UCLA had a guy that was built just like me. But of course, he was an All-American and he was really, really good. But they had me pretend to be that guy in practice and basically blitz the weak side end every single time. And these left tackles and guards just pummeled me all week in practice. But I popped back up and keep at it again. It was like I was just this jack in the box. And at the end of the Vegas Bowl, we wound up winning on a blocked field goal at the very, very end. It was really exciting. Everyone stormed the field. It was great. But at the end of the semester, they go through and they reevaluate every single player. And at the end of the semester, in my review, the head coach said, I want more guys like Rob Cook, because I wound up getting basically all A's that semester. I had the offensive coordinator come up to me and tell me, thank you so much for your hard work and being that defensive end guy for us. You really helped us make the difference and be able to block him better than this game. All sorts of different things. I got all sorts of accolades and praise, but that saying of that coach, when he said, I want more guys like Rob Cook in my program, to me, in that moment, I had affirmation that I could do anything. It didn't matter how the deck was stacked against me, who was beating me down and trying to hold me back. If I fought hard enough and I persevered, I could have anything I wanted. Now, I wish I could tell you that I went on and I wound up having a very successful 4-year career playing football and all sorts of things, but I didn't. Life happens and things change. But that, even if I wasn't supposed to go to those other schools and have those scholarships, for that one lesson for the rest of my life has taught me that no matter what, no matter how hard it might get, no matter how much I might be hanging on the edge here, I can still do it if I just keep going. So when you ask, what are some of the biggest setbacks that have taught me or helped me? To me, that was a pivotal moment, because I, in a single moment, thought I had lost a dream that I'd had. But then for the next 3 months, fought my way back. And then sometimes was literally beat up, it felt like, for that dream. But then was so validated at the end of that. And so for me, when people say, well, you have to have connections, you have to have X, Y, and Z to be able to get your dreams, I say, bull crap. You got to put in the work. You got to be willing to take the hits. But if you're willing to do those things, you can have anything you want.
Great story.
Sorry, that was a little long, and I realized I shared a lot of details there. So hopefully that's not too boring to your listeners.
No, that was great. I got caught
really
up in the story there. So
yeah. I know, we're just
that.
listening.
We're up against time, so I just want to give you an opportunity to share where people can connect with you, where we can learn more about everything that you're doing. Yeah, I'll just give you the opportunity to share with us.
Well, thank you. Listeners, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's actually the only social media platform that I use. I am not a big social media guy. I purposely try and protect my time a lot. And one of the ways I do that is not being on social media much. So LinkedIn, Rob Cook, you can find me there. You can email me directly at rob@contenderswanted.com. You can check out my podcast on all major podcast platforms. The tagline for the show is meaningful success without sacrificing what's most important in life. Or, like I mentioned earlier, I interview high performers and super successful individuals, and we talk about how did they walk that line of not sacrificing those most important things while still going after that great success. So yeah, that's how you can find me and learn more about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today, Rob. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you making the time to have the chat with us.
Well, Brian, Tanya, thank you for inviting me on the show. I loved it. It was great to be able to visit with you guys and get to know you guys a little bit better as well.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.